Welcome to the Economics Academy. I'm Richard Dennis, Chief Economist at the Australia Institute.
And I'm Matt Grudnoff, the Senior Economist at the Australia Institute.
What we're going to do is talk you through what economics is, why you should care about it, and why it actually helps you understand what's going on in the world around you. So, the first thing we need to talk about is what economics is and isn't.
Aren't economists obsessed with small government, lower taxes? Don't economists know the price of everything and the value of nothing?
And we're obsessed with money.
And money, yeah.
That's why you and I work for a not-for-profit.
Yep, not-for-profit. This is where we earn the big bucks.
We're so obsessed with money that we went into the not-for-profit sector to not make any of it.
Does this mean we failed as economists?
I think so, but stick with us. We think economics is important, even if we don't think it's all about money and profit. What economics is really about is resources. Economics is about the way that we decide what to produce, where to produce, and who to give it to. Money plays a big role in it, but economics isn't all about money. Economics is about real resources. Matt, what are some real resources that we should care about?
Well, resources can be almost anything that we use in life. So they could be things like oil and coal. They could be the wind that powers wind turbines. They could be an education. They could be anything that we can basically use in order to create stuff that we want.
Right, so what about people's time?
Yeah, absolutely. Time is definitely a resource. It's a limited resource. You don't have an unlimited amount of it, but it's definitely a scarce resource, and it's something that we need.
So people watching this video, they're wasting their time, right? They could be watching cat videos.
They could be streaming endless episodes of Friends on Netflix.
So the key principle, the most important concept in economics is what's called opportunity cost. That is, you're sitting here watching this video at the moment, you could be doing something else. You could be watching cat videos. You could be trading shares. You could be out doing some exercise. Maybe if you're watching this on a treadmill, you understand that sometimes you can actually be efficient and do more than one thing at a time. But every time we use a scarce resource, every time we use up some hours, we use up some coal, we use up some trees, we use up anything. Every time we consume a resource, we've given up the opportunity to use that resource for something else. So economics, the science of economics, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute, the science of economics is all about opportunity cost. And it defines itself as the science of the efficient allocation of scarce resources. Now that's so important, I'm going to write it on my whiteboard. Matt, what do we mean by a science?
Well, a science is usually something that has positive statements, so something that you can prove, something where you start with a hypothesis and you collect evidence and you can show that it's true, and other people can then use the same thing and repeat the experiment and get the same result.
You mean like facts and stuff?
Yep, like facts and stuff.
So economics is all about facts and stuff?
Well, that's a good question. Okay, so let's think about the efficient allocation of scarce resources. Let's imagine that it's Saturday night in the emergency room of a busy hospital. There are lots of people coming in. What's the limited resource?
Doctors.
Yep, so medical staff being able to be treated. How are we going to allocate those resources? What's the most efficient way of allocating those resources?
First in, best dressed.
All right, so what you're saying is that the rich people who live near this inner city hospital should get treatment before the poor people who live in the outer suburbs.
Yeah, well, I meant the people that got injured first get treated first, but yeah, if they chose to live near a hospital, that was clever of them.
Well, what about if we've got a guy who's got a bad sunburn, he's come into the emergency room, and we have a woman who's gone into labour early and has massive complications.
Well, who got there first?
The sunburnt guy got there first.
So she's a queue jumper.
Yeah, so how do we efficiently allocate these resources, these scarce resources?
Okay, so sounds like she's got a good case. So she's got a more pressing need than the sunburnt guy, so we should let her go first.
But how do we know that she's got a more pressing case? Perhaps we should have the doctor come out and say, look, my time's available now, let's have an auction. And obviously the person who needs it most is going to be willing to pay the most, so they'll win the auction.
Well, that's how we allocate houses, I suppose.
Yep, that's exactly how we allocate houses.
And it's how they do it in America, so maybe we should copy them.
Well, true, but I probably think that most of our audience would think that that was a terrible way to allocate resources.
Wow. So are you saying economists should decide?
Well, yeah, should we efficiently allocate scarce resources in this particular way?
Okay, but how are we as economists going to help people decide who should get in first?
Well, that's a good point. So we use a triage method where we basically have a doctor, an expert, assess people and decide whether or not who needs the resource the most. Is that the most efficient way to allocate the resources?
Okay, so that works for hospitals. We'll let the people that need the hospital care in the first because we've triaged them, they need it most. Maybe we should do that at restaurants. If I'm really hungry, I should get straight in.
Yeah, good point. So what we need to do is have some expert assess how hungry you are. And if you're the most hungry person, you jump the queue and get a table.
Right, so who gets to decide when we use this triage system and when we use a queuing system?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think this gets back to the important point about economics. Now, economics is this great toolbox. It has these great tools for efficiently allocating scarce resources. But in a society, there might be times when we don't want to efficiently allocate scarce resources. There could be times when we want to do it in a fair way. There could be times when we want to do it...
fairly allocate scarce resources rather than efficiently allocate scarce resources.
We might want to allocate them so that the representatives of our government can allocate them to a broad range of people.
So we could choose to be nice.
Yep.
But who gets to make this choice? This is what I'm confused about. I thought I went into economics so I could be in charge of everybody. That's how it works, isn't it?
Well, that's the important point. Maybe there are times when economists aren't the people you should be talking to. And you're talking to two economists right now, but what I'm saying is maybe you shouldn't listen to economists all the time. Maybe what you should be thinking about when you're deciding whether or not economists have something important to say on this topic is, do you want those resources efficiently allocated? Because if you don't, if you want them fairly allocated, if you want them allocated by need, rather than how much, say, money you have, then perhaps economists aren't the best people to be talking to.
So when you ask an economist, you kind of know what answer you're going to get. So if you like the answer, you should probably want to ask economists a lot of questions. And if you don't like the answer, maybe don't ask them.
Yeah, but there are important questions in our society that need answering. And that's why we have, in our society, we have parliaments to make those decisions. And often politicians will try and limit people's choices and try and get the answer they want by saying, well, no, the most efficient way of doing this, of allocating this resource, is that we need to listen to the economists and do it this way. And effectively they're abrogating their responsibility where they're the decision maker, and that perhaps there are other ways apart from the most efficient way that are important.
All right, so we'll come back to the other ways, but it's really important to know that every time you go to a hospital in a country like Australia, no one expects there to be an auction to see who gets to see the doctor first. And when you want to enrol your kids in school, most schools in Australia, the ones run by the government, never ask how much can you afford to pay in deciding to let your kid in. The more useful way to allocate who gets into a school is, do you live in the catchment area? So we have all these mechanisms for allocating scarce resources like access to a school, need to live near it, access to a doctor, appear to be in a lot more, if I'm in more pain than Matt, or I just scream louder, I get to go in first. So sometimes as a society we choose to allocate resources according to what we think is fair or nice or safe, and sometimes we allocate resources according to who can pay the most, but it's actually up to us as citizens to decide which way we want to do it. And what we're going to focus on in our Economics Academy is the economist's toolbox, but what we're trying to stress to everybody is it's always a choice to use the toolbox. So whether or not we want to focus on optimising and the efficient allocation of scarce resources narrowly defined by economists, or whether we just want to be nice and say, well, whoever needs the hospital can use it, or whether we just want to feel safe and spend $200 billion building new submarines. Right? We allocate enormous amounts of resources all the time without the kind of toolbox that economists talk about. It's a democratic question about when. So let's get down to the Economist toolbox. I hope you enjoyed the Australia Institute's Economics Academy. We do these things for free because we really love helping people understand economics. But if you can like, share or subscribe to our service, that'd be great.